Okay. Right, I am just going ahead and sharing my screen. So hopefully, oh, got it. Hopefully everyone can see what is going on here. Right, we're loading. Oh, I've got the spinning wheel of doom. Let's see. Okay, well, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining me. My name's Rachel Addy, and I've been a part of the Textile Skills Centre for about 3 years. I teach design and technology, textiles, key stage 3, 4, and 5 in a secondary school in Bucks, just in case you haven't met me before. Side note, I'm from Yorkshire, and my granddad used to take the light bulb out of the refrigerator because he believed it was a waste of electricity, and that is how I live my life. So I love saving money, and I love being resourceful and thrifty. And so it kind of became a bit of a joke in my department about how tight I am to spend money on resources. And from that, I've kind of just designed this course to help you guys resource smarter and not harder. So there is this huge, and it's not a lie, there's this huge stigma around textiles or D&T. I'm going to use D&T and art and design being a really expensive part of our schools, and it is. And that's one of the main reasons the majority of schools are cutting out a lot of our subjects. So if you look around at your local secondary schools, or even, a few miles out, you'll find that not all secondary schools offer textiles anymore, and they don't offer a large variety of the art D&T subjects because we're seen as being too expensive. And it's true. Sewing machines at £200, £300, £400. When I joined my school, I was outraged to learn that our sewing machine costs for about £600 each. We have a digital embroidery machine that was £6,000. We have an iron that was £250. And by this point, I was on the floor. I'd passed out somewhere, not understanding why we needed to spend such a huge amount of money on these things when we can get them cheaper, sponsored, on lease, donated, in whichever way possible. So as we're fighting to keep textiles up there, number one, still a huge part of what we believe in, I think that this is one of the ways we can help to keep that. So to keep textiles here is by saying, okay, we don't need a £6,000 embroidery machine. It's not necessary. I can get it on loan from a company just down the road, or I can have students go there for a day. So that's what I want you to get to think more about this evening, is what's available to you nearby. What can we use that's free of charge, perhaps? And if we do need to buy something, can we purchase smartly and not just spend our budgets? A couple in my department have once said to me, and I don't know how true this is in other schools, but oh, we've got to spend all our money because if we don't, they take it off us. And I was thinking, I don't know if that's necessarily true, and I can't say whether it is or isn't, but I feel like we shouldn't just be spending money for the sake of it. We need to make sure we're doing it smartly. So just want us to think a bit more. Imagine if it was your own money. That's kind of how I feel. I have ran businesses in the past. I have managed budgets and forecasts and things. So I do know how cringeworthy it can be when people are just spending money because it's not their own. So we are in a funding crisis. As you know, there is a lot of research around it in terms of how this funding crisis is also affecting D&T. And any of you out there that's recently renovated a house, such as myself, will know that material costs in any area of design, textiles, art, they're all going up in price hugely. Timber went up by 56%, I think it was in the end. Paper cost, I think in the end was 150% that went up by. So we really are looking, or sorry, not looking, we really are in the midst of this kind of financial crisis, and we need to make sure that we're doing whatever we can to just kind of resource smarter and not harder. So a couple of things that we're going to look through over the next few slides is working backwards. One of my favorite things to do is to work backwards. Go into your cupboard, see what you already have. I actually use this with shopping, grocery shopping. Side story for you. Go into your grocery, like your pantry and in your freezer, and see what you already have before you go shopping, and you don't buy too much. So I live with that mantra when I do my grocery shopping. I do the same thing when planning projects for students. Work with other departments. We had the business department approach us today. The business department young enterprise team want to do a sublimation mug company. They bought the sublimation heat press for mugs and they said we can have it. Once they've finished with it, if we give them the space, the health and safety training, and allow them to use the facilities, brilliant. Work with other departments. Collaborations with industry, local companies, anyone around you, print houses. I've got a local t-shirt embroiderer down the road. I know Faye, who's often on these calls, she went to a local pleating factory. So there are lots of people around you. It's just finding them and making that connection with them that it can be quite difficult. We've got a local fabric store where I am. I reached out to them and said, I'd love to work with you more. It turns out that her mum, who owned the business before her, was a governor and a head of department of textiles in the school I work in 40, 50 years ago. So she's very willing to collaborate. And these stories didn't come out until we reached out to them. So communities and donations will go into some detail as well, but just don't be afraid to ask is the moral of this story. So working backwards, when was the last time you did a stock take of your cupboards? When was the last time you looked in those donated bags of fabrics? You went to other departments to see what they've got. And I think often we forget about what we already have and we dream about what we want. And that's where we can kind of lose money in a sense, because if you're not using what's been in the cupboards for 10 years, then it loses its value almost. So if you're fortunate enough that you do have cupboards of materials and you've got that stock, anything unused left over from a project 5 years ago, maybe you've just taken over a department, you've just come into a new school and you want to go and have a little rummage around and see what's going on in there. Please do go in there and write yourself an inventory, see what you've already got. If you've got a stack of 10 meters of denim, what can we do with that? If you've got 7 different offcuts of 1.5 meters of poplin fabric, what can we do with those different offcuts of fabrics? Maybe you've just been donated a batch of newspapers. We often get unprinted newspapers from our local print store. So we have a local newspaper. Contact your local newspaper company. They'll give you any excess prints that didn't sell. Now, I know that some schools make newspaper dresses, for example. Other schools will just use them for painting on top of, so that you can throw them in the bin at the end of the lesson to save with tidying up. So just make sure that you're thinking about those contacts or what you might already have, sorry. So write a list is my first tip for you. Go in the cupboard, see what you already have, write a list. And you could always get the students involved in doing this. I've got a sewing bee and they're more than happy to do little admin jobs for me. So get them in the cupboards, get them making lists for you and type yourself up a little inventory. Reach out to other departments, let them know what resources you're in need of, and perhaps you can bulk buy. Okay, so if you're buying acrylic paints in art, then can you just buy a textile medium? I've put that image on the page on the top left here. A textile medium can be put into a simple acrylic paint, and then from that you can paint on fabric. It will wash, it will keep. So that's the way that you can share the art departments. If you're not a part of the art department, you can share their resources and work with them. Thinking about zero resources. If you have zero resources, you can still make this work, okay? By donations, by scrap stores. If you've never heard of or been to a scrap store, that is your absolute number one homework from this training. You must go and find one local to you. Chances are you will have one within an hour. You can find them online. Just simply go online and type in local scrap store. I've put a link to one at the bottom, which is reusefuluk.org. They have a list of different suppliers. Essentially what they are is warehouses full of stock that are left over from companies that they don't need anymore. So you pay a membership to some of them. So perhaps you'll pay £60 a year, and within that year you can go in and help yourself to anything. And in that time as well, you pay pennies really if you do need to pay anything. But this only works if you're working backwards. It doesn't tend to work if you're going in there with a project in mind. So for example, I make skirts in year 10, and my skirts use a poly cotton twill, and I know I need 20 meters of it. If I was going to walk in looking for 20 meters of black poly cotton twill, I know I'm not going to get it. So it's always better going in there with nothing, no kind of opinion of what you need, and then just seeing what they have and taking away from those. So just kind of Going into that, working with other departments a little bit more. So I've put a few on here, for example, as an example, but drama. Do you host school productions? The chances are, yes, you do, and you're probably sick of them by this time of year, as I am. I've just made the most horrific looking Matilda doll. They asked me for a life size doll of a child that they could pick up by the pigtails and throw across the stage. And I'm sure many of you in schools will be having the same conversations with the drama department. They need your help for making costumes. So perhaps you could request that they purchase materials for you, and you can use the excess materials. Perhaps you can use some of their old garments and you can upcycle their old garments. You could make them into something new. Perhaps you could be making bucket hats and things for the cast of a play. We did Scrooge last year, and they all needed bucket hats, and they were incredible. Are they called bucket hats? Top hats. And they were all incredibly expensive. So looking at making those, for example. So just think about drama and what they're doing with school productions. Art, I've mentioned in terms of working with things like acrylic, but again, could you do a cross departmental project? I know a lot of you are art textiles teachers, which is perfect because you've already got that cross curricular link. But if you're like me and you're D&T teacher, can you go out and just suggest ways of working together where you can share materials? Art love working on canvas fabric, so can you buy a lighter weight canvas that they can paint on, stretch their own canvases, but you can also toile in it? So maybe they could use some of your calico, and you can buy more, meaning that buying more, you can get a cheaper price. And don't be afraid to negotiate a cheaper price. The amount of companies I've contacted, Empress Mills is a good one. I sent them an email saying, I work in a school, I've got no money, please help me. They came back and said they'd be willing to give me a 15% discount if I purchased a certain amount. So don't be afraid to ask for discount. Play the poor teacher card if you need to. Science is another good one. They're already teaching elements of textiles. So they are already doing things like dyeing in certain lessons. They might be looking at fibers and fabrics. They have their microscopes. They can look at things already with those microscopes, other than you having to purchase the ones that are specialist for textiles. So could you use some of their materials? Could you use their lab for a testing lesson? Again, more of a D&T element than art textiles, but we have to do testing. So we do flammability, we'll do durability, abrasion. Can you go and work in their labs and use their materials rather than purchasing your own? And again, just thinking about this business link. So, do you have young enterprise at school? Can you get the young enterprise people to collaborate with your department? And in turn, they can kind of reach out and ask for donations that you can keep once their business has moved on. Waste, our favorite thing. I watched the Department for Education's casting like a webinar a few weeks ago about, and they talked about teachers diving in skips. Now I know that that is terrible, and they said it's terrible because we don't have money or time to do things. But I love skip diving. I'm sorry to tell you, but I do love it. I think you can get an absolute bargain in there, and one's man's waste is another man's treasure. It's absolutely the truth. The amount of parents that have donated me something that they thought was going in the bin. I've got a brilliant example of that. I'm on Instagram at the moment. I love this. They're called Spilt Milk. They take old tablecloths, the old hand embroidered tablecloths, and make them into tops. And I showed this to my student, and her mum donated 26 of them to me. They are the most intricately beautiful tablecloths, a few stains on there, but a bit of fussy cutting will allow us to get around the edges of those. But they could have ended up in the bin because nobody uses those really vintage embroidered tablecloths anymore. There was even the ones that, I don't want to call them doilies, but like the lace ones that you would put just in the middle of the table with a vase on, and all those ones as well. So again, this lady on Instagram makes them, she makes collars out of them, or puff sleeves and all sorts. Of really, really amazing. So tip number one, in terms of waste, they're not just diving for waste, but don't buy more than you need to. Okay, so I've put more elements of D&T on here as well, but not just textile related. Anywhere in the school, anywhere that, anything you're thinking of making, just make sure that when you're purchasing things, don't necessarily buy more than you need to, and perhaps you can ask them for offcuts. So a lot of companies, when they get to the end of a roll, for example, on fabric, they can't sell it as a meter because there isn't enough of it. So you can get end of rolls. And a lot of websites do have those as a separate section on the websites. So if you're not necessarily in need of a specific fabric, then go hunting for offcuts and end of rolls. Think about running a scrap heap challenge as one of your projects. That's why a lot of these images on here, I did it for the whole of D&T. We gave one group fabric, one acrylic, one metal, one paper, and one acrylic to work with. And these were some of the things they came up with. So Textiles made a feather. So they stapled round some chicken wire around a wooden frame and then stuffed it with scraps of fabric. And another took some offcuts of metal and welded them into lettering for design and technology. So perhaps you could come up with a project based on waste, entirely based on waste. Our school, we're very proud of it, and I think I mentioned it in my last tea and chat. We did a big installation of poppies made just from plastic bottles. So they cut the bottoms off the plastic bottles and they made poppies from them. So it's amazing what you can make with waste. And then write a scheme of work as well. So leading on from that, could you develop a scheme of work that's sustainable? So one that comes, can be always replenished. So if your scheme of work is using waste and scrap fabrics, it doesn't need to change just because you've got a different type of scrap fabric or a different color or a different weight of fabric. It's just the project stays the same. Your scheme of work stays the same. You're just changing slightly based on what you've got to hand. And I'll show you a scheme of work in a few minutes so you can see what that would look like. Collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. Cannot talk about this enough. Industry do like to collaborate with schools. Local companies do love it. I use the word CSR letters, CSR, corporate social responsibility. The majority of the big dogs do have a responsibility to give back to their schools, their local education sites. So make sure that you're contacting these local businesses and asking for help. Some people, I don't know if anyone on the call knows, I have given out bags and bags of socks before to teachers because there's a local company I work with in Loughborough. They're a sock supplier. They keep one sock for themselves for reference. They give the other sock to the customer, meaning they don't have a pair, which means they can't be sold. So there are so many things you could do working with another company and then upcycling their waste into something new. If you're lucky enough that they're on your doorstep, they might even come into school and pitch for you. So when I was at university, I know, but this would be great for A level. This company in particular, and I've kept this contact for that many years, used to come in every year and set and pitch a business idea to us and come up with a brief and say, this is what I want you to do. I want you to design and make a capsule collection for this based on this. And the students would design and make things, but they would provide us with the yarns and the fabrics for the challenge. So a really, really good way to get some donations of fabric and or product. So have a look at fabrics or factories or suppliers in your area. I've put a link on there, makeitbritish.co.uk. There is a directory of local manufacturers, people that manufacture in the UK. So you can always look up some of those, see if any of them are close enough. If they're not that close, school trip. I know we all hate the word school trips or 2 words because they're a nightmare to organise, but the amount of things you can learn in a day, and for any of you that sat on my progression assessment and planning progression and assessment course, you'll know how I feel about going to a factory for a day in order to tick huge amounts of your theory off. And that could be another way for you to build relationships with them and also get some of their freebies as well. I'd also recommend contacting local universities. So if we've got the University of Reading not far from us. I've also got Bucks nearby. So it's definitely worth speaking to them. And again, seeing if you can maybe tag on the back of their orders if they're buying more. Maybe their students have, bought too much fabric and it would have gone to waste. So again, just make sure that you're looking for opportunities everywhere. I've put a little link for Wool for Schools down there. It's a design competition. They come up every single year. It's a perfect cover lesson as well. If anyone needs a bit of easy cover, it's just a design competition. I'm pretty sure they do every year a Christmas jumper one as well. So that's a really good one. 0 resources, 0 making, 0 machines. You can even come up with just a design competition. So in terms of contacting these local companies then, speak to print companies, trade offices, anyone, B&Q, Toolstation, anyone you have time to contact or speak to. just ask them questions. Don't be afraid to be their best friends. Again, if you were on my tea and chat last week, you'll know that I got invited to my local garden centre's Christmas party, because that's how often I go there and how often I talk to them. I'm now on their list because I make friends with them. They gave me a free Christmas tree today. So it's amazing what you can get from local companies if you just remain friendly and want to work with them. We have a local printing company to us that gave us over £1,500 worth of card. The reason they gave it to us is because the card was in the incorrect size for what they needed, but it wasn't suitable for a standard printer without being cut down. So in other words, it was bigger than A3. So I had to get my students to cut it all down to size before we could use it. But hey, it was £150 and it was perfect for printing on. They also have scraps and offcuts. If anybody wants to do any paper making, which I love doing paper making, you can use those scraps of paper to make more essentially. But not just printing for cards. Think about fabric printing companies locally as well. Perhaps you've got a screen printing company nearby. They do what's called strike-offs. So all print companies will do a test, a strike-off print of the print for the buyer. And once the buyer said yes or no, those print offs, if they are bought, will go into a folder, and if they're not, will either go into an archive or they'll be binned. So you could then again ask if they've got any strike offs that they don't need anymore that they're getting rid of. And again, another really good way to pick up some freebies from a print company. I know a lot of you may have contacted already some digital printing companies for having fabric printed and getting students to send off their digital files to be printed as well. So again, there's so many different companies out there. It's just being brave. I've mentioned B&Q a million times, so sorry to keep mentioning them, but there's other companies out there as well that do the same thing. They're always willing to donate wallpaper offcuts, end of rolls, anything like that. So wallpaper is great to use as paper. So if you can't afford reams and reams of paper for doing your drawing projects, then you can just go and get a big roll of wallpaper, lining wallpaper, and rip it up into pieces and just give those to the students, and then you're not buying anything new, you're just taking one of their roles. And again, they're more than happy to do that. I give some of you may have seen my paint chip skirt. Again, that was from B&Q. I took all these paint chips, and I saw one of our food teachers actually. She took all of the browns and she did some caramel testing and matched them to the paint chips from B&Q as well. So, loads of things you can do. Even if you gave every student, there was this amazing lady at the knitting and stitching show. I can't remember what she was called now, but she had all these tiny little squares of applique and embroidery and stitched them all together. Imagine if you just gave every student a paint chip and told them to come up with something on there, a bit of embroidery on it or something, and then you collaboratively bring it all together. So it's just so many ideas. I'm a wealth of them when it comes to not paying for things. Upholsterers. For D&Ters, we cringe a little bit when we get upholsterers giving us fabric because it's too thick for garments. But it is perfect for year 7s and 8s if you're doing, wall hangings or cushions or coverings of things. It is really good for that. So, do make friends with your local upholsterers. They do sometimes have curtain fabrics which are slightly better linings as well. But we had a company unfortunately shut down not long ago, and they gave us all their excess rolls of fabric. They could even just be backing fabrics, so it's always worth having some to hand. So this corporate social responsibility then that I've talked about, all businesses have it. And essentially, it just means that they will do something for the community, for a school, for a charity. They will do something that means that they are supporting their local area. So it's always worth checking what their CSR is, and you can find it on their website. So this usually applies to larger companies. You won't find it on independent stores. But if you're, if you're not afraid to kind of pop into those stores and speak to their managers, then do that. I've walked into shops and just flashed my teacher's badge like I'm part of the police force and said, I'm here from the school. I'm here to see what resources you've got that I can have. And they're very, very willing to help you. And I'd say as well with this, don't be afraid to send students back to them or parents back to them. So another example for that then is I'm going to use the garden centre again, but they gave us £1,500 worth of plants. And with that, we then ran a community day with the garden centre where parents took their children there on a Saturday for this community day. And that meant that the parents were then in the shop spending money. So they were getting back something from us. I've had a local parent that's offered to do the decking around my pond for free. The only thing he wants is his sign put up around the school. Imagine if you've got parents that work in the textile industry and all they want from you is a sign put up in the school. No problemo. You want an email sent to 1,200 parents? I got you. No problem. If that's all it takes to get me some free fabric, I can absolutely do that. The other thing is getting student discounts. This isn't necessarily something for you to have for free, but this is important for your students if they're buying their own fabric, which is another way to avoid that huge invoice at the end of the year. If you can get students to purchase certain parts of their projects, brilliant. And that will sound even more appealing if you can say, oh, I've negotiated a 10 or 20% discount with this store. So Hobbycraft do it anyway. A couple of other stores will do it already. Just check on their websites. But if you've got a local haberdashery store, go and talk to them. So again, I told you I contacted my local one. Turns out her mum was once a teacher at the school I work at. So she was more than happy for me to work with her. It sends students to their store rather than to any other store. So if you've got 3 or 4 fabric shops near you, then they'd rather go to the one where the discount is. So it's sending students their way. It works for both of you. So there's the last thing to think about is these labour days. So some companies will offer you free labour. So they might not be able to give you materials, but they could give you people to do things. So a good example for that we did was our pond, which is great, not relevant to textiles, but it was a great way to have people in doing some gardening. Another thing that we've done though is we've got them working on the school production. So having a company come in, they sent 8 workers in. They gave us a full day, and in that time, they're able to build sets. They're able to work with stage design. So it's always worth, if you can't get free fabric, could you get some free labor? Could you have someone, come in for a day or two, like almost like a placement, I guess, and cut all your fabrics for you if you don't have a technician support? Maybe you've got your blocks and your patterns ready and you just need some help cutting things out. Or maybe it's just you need your classroom decorating. Maybe it's that it's really super ugly. Sorry if it is super ugly. I'm sure you make it pretty. But if it is, then you could maybe even ask them to come in and help with some decorating and some renovations of your classroom. Community. So community, I am sure you're doing it for yourself. So if you're doing it for yourself, then we should be doing it for school as well. And again, I'm 99% sure you're all doing this already. Um, get yourselves on Free Cycle, get yourself on Facebook Marketplace. Do not be afraid to be cheeky. I am cheeky all the time. And I will quite happily just email someone that's listed something for £20 and just say, if this doesn't sell, would you mind donating it to your local school? We're happy for you to say that you've donated it, and some companies as well naughtily can offset it against tax. So if it's big companies, they can offset things as well. So don't be afraid to ask for things for free. They can always say no. I lived in China for 5 years. I love haggling. I absolutely love those people that hate going to places like Turkey or Ibiza or wherever on holiday because they don't want to haggle. I'm the opposite of that. I love it. And I always tell myself they're never going to sell it if they're going to lose money. A company will never sell something at a loss. Very, very rarely, should I say. So don't be afraid to ask for it. Don't be afraid to ask for a donation. Where they might give you something for free, they might put the price up for someone else. That's all right. We're allowed to do that. Ask for things in local newspapers. So maybe where I am, we've got the Marlovian. I had a triple page spread in the Marlovian in, I can't remember what it was now, I want to say September, talking about eco and what we do for eco. But there's no harm in asking your local newspaper to talk about showcasing some students' work and asking for donations as well. Perhaps your students are working on I've just watched the sewing bee tonight, and I'm out of date, so don't judge me on this, but I just watched the West African one and it was amazing. What if you were to do, this huge project on West Africa, and the students raised money whilst doing a catwalk, you charged entry, you donated, and then that was documented in the local newspapers, and at the bottom you ask for donations for the department to cover the cost of materials. So doing something spectacular, advertising about it in your local area, is another way to ask for some materials. Letters to parents and carers. Parent mails, ask for supplies. You don't necessarily need to ask for contributions. We have just sent out an email of contributions. We do, as a school, we ask for a suggested £20, but they don't have to pay that amount of money. One thing that I think is really effective when asking for money is show them what they're getting. If your students are making a skirt in year 10 and it would cost them £20 to buy it from H&M, then why wouldn't their parents be prepared to give them £20 towards the materials, the zips and everything else that they might need? If you're going to buy a piece of art textiles for £2,000 or however many hundreds of pounds, depending on who you're buying them from, then why wouldn't parents be willing to pay something similar for their child's piece of work? So please don't be afraid to ask for things. I do think it works a lot better if you show them what the outcome is and why it's expensive. We made kimonos recently. Kimonos do use a lot of fabric. So I just showed the parents the fabric that I've got was donated. I've tried to get free fabric from local suppliers. They've given me this. It just doesn't work for what I need it for. I need to buy this. Please, can you help? So I showed them it. The students took their kimonos home. They loved them. So again, just show them what they're getting for their money, essentially. Sorry, so I've just kind of gone over this bit already, but just adding to this about an Amazon wish list. So if you haven't got an Amazon wish list for your department, start one. So if there's something that you really need to buy, maybe you're looking for an overlocker, sublimation printer, maybe you're just looking for some dyes, whatever it is, put it all on your Amazon wish list. And then you can request parents to buy things on the Amazon wish list. It can either be done anonymously or it could be done, they can tell you who it is, and it just gets delivered straight to your school. Okay. I made a really good point there. I just remembered it in reading. In food and nutrition, parents do not mind buying ingredients. So if you're teaching a food lesson, they do not mind giving their children money to go to the shops and buy ingredients for a cake or for a lasagna. So it's the same thing. Why would they not mind giving money to buy a jewelry box or a room organizer or anything else that they're making? Amazon wish list. It's a good one. Charity. Last year I worked with Florence Nightingale. So if you've got Florence Nightingale near you, do contact their head office. They're brilliant at working with schools. They came in and they did a sustainable fashion day. Sorry, I'm gonna have to just drink my tea a second. That's when you know you're talking too much. They did a sustainable fashion drop down day for us, and it was totally free. They did this amazing interactive workshops where students got up, tried on vintage clothing. They talked about the impacts of fast fashion. It was really, really good. And in it promoted their charity shop. So the reason they wanted to do it is then all these hundreds of children would go home and say, Florence Nightingale just came into school and did this amazing event. And then the parents will go shopping there. So now we have it on our calendar every year. So it also, like I said, it gives textiles a place on the academic calendar. If you don't know, Sustainable Fashion Week is usually around about my birthday. Write my birthday down, 25th of September. So it's around about that week. So you can put that on the calendar as something that comes up in your thought for the week, or assembly rotas, gets us in the calendar, gets the charity helping you out as well. One thing I struggled with as a D&T teacher, especially at A level, was buying things like modal, lyocell, viscose, bamboo. They are really expensive. Silk, anything like that. It's just too expensive to buy when I'm just doing a bit of fabric analysis. So I'm not actually buying 2 meters to make a top with. I just need them to pull fibers apart and, burn them, smell them, whatever, touch them, whatever it is. I couldn't afford to buy those. So I spoke to my local charity shop and just said, if you get any of these fibers and you can't sell them, maybe there's a hole in it or, for whatever reason they can't sell it, they'll keep them to the side for you. and then that way you can just use those instead. Also fantastic for an upcycling project. And I think there is, and that's part of the scheme of work. I think I'll show you in just a second. So I'm going to go back to this idea that you have nothing, nada, and that you don't have anything in your department. You can teach some elements of fashion through CAD. Okay, so you could use just some simple presenting software, and in these softwares you could draw up some design illustrations. All of the ones on here are free. I've used all of them. I love PowerPoint. If you're on TikTok, get yourself following some TikTok PowerPoint gurus, because they are incredible what you can do. Nikki started doing this one on her course where she puts videos behind her fashion illustrations of fabrics that she's printed, and it is incredible. If you haven't seen Nikki's short course CAD session, then certainly get yourself signed up for that, because it is fantastic. So a lot of these are free, easy for you to use, and from that you can even go on to printing your own fabrics with a lot of these. So again, thinking that you've got nothing at all, why not make some garments out of scrap paper? Using up cut up bits of paper. I didn't even get them to glue them down. I literally just got them to place them on the mannequins. And from that, we took pictures, and they were what went up on the walls, or they were what we put in our sketchbooks. I didn't even get them to glue them down, so that then I could reuse all those shapes and all those pieces of paper. Rebecca, I think your mum did one of these, so she had fun with it. But this is a beautiful cross-curricular activity as well. Maths, talking about geometry, what shapes do we use in fashion? And again, Nikki did this whole resource on there. I put a link for it, a cross-curricular learning maths in fashion, and I absolutely loved that. I think that's when I approached you, Dawn, wasn't it, and said, I love you, please can I work with you? It was that one. Scrap fabrics. I love scrap fabrics. Don't throw things away, but don't be a hoarder. There's a fine line there, isn't there? It's like banter, how we talk about banter. Very fine line. So thinking about what you can make from scrap fabrics. My little Christmas pin that I made with some year 8s. We bought some brooch badges. You can get them for about £4 for 50, I think I paid, on eBay. And all we did was took scrap fabrics and we just appliqued 2 bits of fabric together and stitched on some sequins, and we made little Christmas brooches. We've done upcycled plant pot covers. We've done this one was an eco printed apron which we had left over, so we did some eco printing. We had some scraps fabric, so we just made these aprons. I didn't even have a pattern, so I literally just made these aprons off the top of my head, and then it was just utilizing any fabric. So perhaps you could give them a brief, and say, right, you've got some scrap fabric here. We want some aprons for the cookery club or for gardening club. Let's make something. And like I said, they could even be patchwork. You could even make aprons out of 17 different bits of fabric stitched together. This was the sock competition that I mentioned before. So I gave away bags of socks to schools, and one lady sent me a lovely email with her winners on there, and I absolutely love them. So for year 7, a really easy challenge is to do these sock monsters, sock bears, whatever you want to call them. I love the fact that someone made a dolphin, because that for me is totally unique and not what I would have expected from them to make from these. I then emailed these to the company that gave me the socks. They put them out on their news bulletin. All the staff loved them, and they were even willing to judge the competition. They haven't judged this one, but they were willing to judge a future competition. So again, fantastic way to use your free resources and come up with something from them. More ideas from scraps then. So have a look at websites. This is just a website I go to a lot for ideas on scraps. So you can find that at the bottom here. Tissue pouches. I can't remember what that technique's called, Don, where you rope the fabrics round and you turn them into little bowls and things like that. But it's really fun. They can just use a blanket stitch to wrap them together. So there's loads of different things you can do with that, even weaving, making rugs, all kinds of different things. We did little woven coasters out of scrap fabric. I've got one on my desk somewhere. I did a little patchwork bumblebee coaster as well. There's some keyring ideas on there. I've just been downloading a pattern just before this evening to make some pin cushions that go around your wrist. And what they've done is they've got a scrunchie. Essentially, it's a scrunchie, and they put this padded dome on the top like a watch, and that's a little pin cushion. So there's so many brilliant ideas of projects that you can run that don't take much fabric at all, and your brief can be to students, here's this box of scrap fabric that was going to go to landfill. What are we going to do with it? What are we going to make? Go home, research a product you can make from scrap fabrics. Come back to me with ideas. Now, I know that could be chaotic if you end up with 20 kids with 20 different ideas, that maybe kind of give them some direction. I call it planting the seed. It's funny because whenever I read my fashion textiles assessments, my written ones, every single child says, I will only buy things from vintage from now on. I'm like, yeah, I've kind of put that into them a bit too much, that bit, because that's all I do. Don't be afraid to ask your students to get involved. So I absolutely, even today, I'm not even kidding you, period 4 today, I went to the business department, I stood in front of the A-level students and I said, I need a business plan, I need some students to help me write it, please help me. I've got other students that are organising conferences for me. I have textile ambassadors that come in and help with my sewing bees. Do not be afraid to ask for anyone, even outside of your department. Speak to your head boy or your head girl, get them collaborating with businesses and companies. Perhaps it's something that your business department could run as their first week's project with their students. Obviously, side note, do check your safeguarding rules, do check your school's policy in terms of GDPR and contacting external companies, most of which can be found on your school's website or through your designated safeguarding lead or GDPR leads. So do just double check those things before you go out and get students involved. But for me, for example, we've had no issues with doing that as long as I'm on copy of everything. Right, so I'm just going to show you a couple of bits to go with that. I have talked at you for a long time. Are you all feeling like you can get loads of things for free now? Yeah, we're excited. To be good. So we're going to go out there and challenge the norm. That's what I'm talking about. So love it. Like I said, not afraid. Even my house is full of freebies. When I moved back to the UK, I was like, I've got no money. Please can I have a free sofa? I've got a free bookcase. Free. Yeah, that's free. Sewing stores free. Yeah, looking around my room, I'm like, yeah, that's all free. I'm not afraid to ask for freebies in anything. So I am just going to show you 2 other quick things, and then I will open up to questions, or if anyone wants to ask me questions while I'm looking at things, feel free. Okay. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say you can ask in the chat box as well.
So this is a resource from Nikki, or is this yours, Dawn? I can't remember. Fibers and Fabrics, I think it might. Oh, it's Julius.
Yeah, Julius, yeah.
So you can find this on our website. I'll show you where to find our free resources in a minute. And on here, there is a whole project about fabrics and handling fabrics. Now, the reason why I've brought this up is because I love draping. And the episode of Sewing Bee I just watched, the West Africa one that I just watched tonight before coming on this call, they did this draping exercise, and I just absolutely, and the kids love it because it is quick wins for them. All they're doing is pinning things onto mannequins. Now, why does that win for you in terms of resourcing smarter, not harder? You don't have to get them to cut anything. You don't have to get them to stitch anything. You can just get them to pin it, take a photo of it, then unpin it, and then you get your fabric back. So you could literally have 10 pieces of fabric ready that you don't want to cut because you might want to use them for another project. But in the meantime, you could do a mini draping project. And whilst they're doing that draping project, this is obviously a very art textiles way of draping, but for your D&Ters on the call, you could be talking about fabric characteristics, you could be talking about tensile strength, seam slippage, whatever it is, drape, handle, luster, whatever it is, you can be having all of those conversations. So do have a look through these free resources for some ideas on draping, because you can honestly get some really fantastic results from draping. And like I said, the kids absolutely love it. So I'm just going to show you quickly, and I'm sure you have all been on here. If you haven't, shame on you, but you will have. On our Textile Skills Centre website, Dawn, you're in the corner of my screen, I'm just hiding you. You can go into our Teachers Hub, and then you can find Teachers Resources. And in here, there are heaps of free resources for you. Okay, so you can have a look through some of these. You can download. There's the one I was just talking about that I've just been through for Dawn's. You've got Nikki's cross curricular. Where's Nikki's cross curricular? That's on here. This one here. That's the maths and D&T one. So lots of, you know, wrap and reeve. If you've not seen those, get on there and have a look at some of those free resources. So from me, what we'll send through to you is a couple of things. I've got a sourcing links page for you. So your sourcing links page is just a quick document with where you can have a look at buying things if you're not already. I have put a little disclaimer on here. These are only suggestions. We are not at all affiliated with any of these companies. We're not paid. It's not an advert. These are just some suggestions if you do want to have a look at them. So some suppliers with student discount, scrap stores on there. So do have a little look at that page. Oh, what have I done there? Made a mess of that. Then there is also a scheme of work for you on here as well, which is the Scrap Heap Challenge scheme of work. So you can download this resource as well. So this resource is just a quick mapped out 10 lesson project where you can, hold on, where am I? So the outline of the project is here. So understanding minimalizing waste. So waste is not only an environmental problem, but also an economical one. On average, Europeans produce 481 kilograms, blah, 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 blah. I'll let you read through this in your own time, but I've mapped out the lessons and the resources on there. You could simplify it. You could do it as 2 lessons. You know, you could do it as 10, you could do it as 50. You do it as many lessons as you like. Okay. So lots and lots of information there. I know I just talked at you for 50 minutes, so I do apologize, but I would love now just if anyone's got any questions, if you've got a project that you're already working on that you think I don't know how to fund this, throw it at me. Let me make it cheaper. Another side story, my official job title in my previous job was a product developer. I don't know if you've ever heard of a product developer, but they nicknamed me the undesigner. So that was my nickname in the company because they'd give me beautiful designs and I'd be like, no, you can't afford that. Now get rid of that button. It's pointless. We'll put a zip in there instead because that makes that cheaper. So I was the undesigner at work. It was my job to make things cheaper, which is why we have so much landfill. And I'm repenting my sins right now. And then it goes quiet. Come on, Dawn, fill that awkward space for me before I keep talking.
Sorry, I was on mute.
Is that all right?
So really interesting stuff, loads of stuff there. You do talk fast, I have to say.
I'm sorry. Imagine how the kids feel. Although I think they keep up with me now. I think they know now to keep up. So yeah, hopefully that was of some use to you. Whatever year group you're teaching, whoever you're teaching, there should be plenty of things that you can adapt any of these ideas to. The most crucial thing is here is don't feel overwhelmed by limited amounts of time. Don't be thinking, oh, I haven't got loads of time to email these companies or to speak to these people. See what resources you have, be resourceful, who can help you. I sweet talked our receptionist recently, my little Fifi in reception loves a biscuit. She's now my bestie and she sends out a lot of my emails and does a lot of my quotes from companies and things for me now. And my lady, my little Trish Wish up in finance, who loves a little smile and a chat rather than sitting in her dark hole. She loves it. I'm like a ray of sunshine. I don't even put my purchase orders in properly. She does them for me. You just got to be nice to people, haven't you?
Thank you so much, Rachel. There's loads of stuff there. Has anybody got any questions that they want to ask Rachel? Jane, you got your hand up.
Yeah, it's not so much a question. It's just that years ago, we used to do Girl Guide things in the Isle of Man, and we did this thing called Manx quilting, which I don't know if you've seen. You might call it something different. And literally, I get boxes of like squares of fabric, and they're nothing. They're absolutely everything and anything. And the kids love it because you don't have to be great at stitching because it's just, I don't know if you can see on the back.
They look great.
These little packs, and the kids they make pin cushions. We make
love
quilts,
it.
You know, it's just anything and everything, and there's different colors. And I'm doing Christmas ones at the minute, but that's just strips of old fabric, you know, offcuts. And the kids absolutely love it. And the fabric shops I've started giving me them now. Now a textile addict.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I might do some. I've never done any of those. That's a good idea.
Well, I've got a little pack as well with all the instructions that we put together with a lovely lady in the Isle of Man called Joan Thrussell. She sadly passed away. So I've photocopied. So I'll, if you want them, I'll download and or I'll copy them. I'm not very good at IT, but I'll do
Send
it
it to
and
me, I like it.
I'll
Definitely
them.
send them, and we'll stick them in
Yeah.
the Dropbox for people to use. That'd be
Yeah,
brilliant.
we'd love that. Yeah, I've
Yeah,
got
lovely.
a couple of some of the things that I do, I make templates for myself. So I've got a few of those that we can share back as well. Some of my little badge templates and
Oh
things
yeah,
like
that
that.
looks good.
Yeah, I just love what you can make out of scrap. And, you know, coming from the textile industry as well, and the next episode of Sew&Be I'm just on, no cheating because I haven't watched it yet, is zero waste pattern cutting. And I always get students to think about if they bought 2 meters of fabric and they only need 1.5, what are they going to do with the individual little bits around it? Can they make a scrunchie? Can they do some applique? What can they do with those leftover scraps? And that's a really good, you know, environmental conversation, not just a cost saving conversation as well, which is so important.
Yeah.
Sustainability, absolutely.
Love it.
So yeah, just to remind everybody, you should get an email either tomorrow or the day after. I can't remember which day it goes out. It's a follow-up email, and it will have a link to the Dropbox, and it will have a link to the presentation tonight if you want to listen to it again. It'll also have the link to the surveys that I was on about earlier, and I'd really appreciate it if you could actually complete those surveys. So we've got 6 minutes left. So if anybody else has got any questions.
Or do you want to share something with me? Maybe you've got a thrifty tip that I could learn. Rebecca's on this call. Hi, Rebecca. Sorry, I'm just going to use yours. One thing, do you mind me saying? You don't mind. I'm just doing it anyway. Rebecca's working with other schools to use resources from other departments, which is an amazing idea. So I work near Rebecca, and she doesn't have a lot of sewing machines. In fact, any, right? So she brings her students up to our school and they use our resources. So that's the other thing. If you've got a local school or you're part of an academy or a trust, reach out to your other schools, see what they have, contact local, you know, build Facebook groups. Whenever I meet any teachers, we put ourselves in a WhatsApp group, share ideas, work together.
Rachel, can I just say that Rebecca is primary too, so it's quite nice to have that connection, not just secondary school, but primary.
Yeah. Oh, I like these.
There's some interesting, some interesting things
Livy,
coming
I've done
in.
that. Yeah, that's a good one. So Liv said about the fluffy stuff that comes in Hello Fresh boxes. Yeah, we've worked with some of those before for quilting. Works brilliantly. I'm gonna have a look, Claire, at that book, Zero Waste Patterns. I've got my phone in front of me looking at it already. Yeah, that looks great as well. I also have, if anyone does sublimation printing, I've got a supplier, I'm not going to tell you who it is, the secret, that gives me offcuts of 100% polyester fabric that is perfect for sublimation printing. So we don't buy much sublimation fabrics. I don't.
So actually that's call your local printer, t-shirt printer.
Yeah, we get velours, we get toweling fabrics, we get all sorts from them.
Okay, is that it, everybody? That's been brilliant.
Food for thought.
I'm going to stop the video now.
Your video or your recording?
My recording. Sorry, I'm doing that completely wrong. Stop recording.